bleeds nostalgia?
Miami Vice. Changed television, changed Miami.
Defined Miami look that didn't exist before that, right?
Yeah, took what was South Beach and just literally gave it a pulse. And you could see the change after that show. It was insane.
All right, I'm Alexis Garcia.
Abel Sanchez.
And we are gathered here today to talk about nostalgia.
Yes, sir.
And its impact in culture.
Yes.
But I think a good place to start is like, what do we even mean when we talk about nostalgia?
Yeah.
I looked up some definitions. I'll tell you, the one, there's a couple that you would look up, that you would see when you first look it up. The one that really got to me was from Michael Chabon, a phenomenal author for The New Yorker. He called nostalgia the ache that arises from the consciousness of lost connection.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, that one I think gets at everything we're talking about, right?
Pretty much.
Especially when you talk about lost connection.
Yeah.
So we'll stick with that one, not even throw out the other ones.
Yeah.
But to kind of get to you, there's a lot of sayings. I only drive down a couple of them that when you say them, you're really referencing nostalgia. Good old days. That's nostalgia.
Definitely.
Classic places, classic things, you're referencing that nostalgia, an institution, right? Or in your case, old Miami shit.
Old Miami shit, yes.
So who are you? How does nostalgia play a role in your life?
I say, I'm just a local guy, I always say, who schleps to work, who created a passion project on the gram. And it became a thing. You wake up 10 years later, and I'm very blessed to have my own lane and just trying to hold it down for the history and the culture of Miami.
And for those that don't know, what is that Instagram handle that you do most of your work on?
Miami Stadium, all one word.
Miami Stadium. How did you land on Miami Stadium as that identity?
That was a historic stadium in Alapata that I grew up in. Basically, as a kid back in the 80s, the Baltimore Orioles trained there. Brooklyn Dodgers trained there. Going back to Jackie Robinson, the original Marlins were born there. So it was a couple miles up the road from the Orange Bowl. So that was childhood for me, and I liked the name.
So really, it was nostalgia that drove you to come up with that name
100%.
For a profile about...
Yeah.
Is it your main Instagram profile?
It is my main Instagram profile as well as my merch collection, and it kind of spread from there into... I'm lucky it's an all-encompassing handle.
Yeah. But when you started it, it was just your Instagram name.
It was just the Instagram name.
You weren't doing merchandise. What did you start doing with that?
Sharing content.
Yeah, what kind of content?
It ended up, I think, subconsciously being... I created the page that I wanted to see that wasn't out there. I was looking for this stuff, couldn't find it anywhere, and I had a lot of it on my computer. I wanted more. I said, let me just create this and see what happens.
What were some of those first things that you posted that you felt were nailing it? That doesn't have to be the first things, but the ones where you're like, this is it. This is what I'm going to keep doing.
It was the Miami Stadium, and then little by little,
images of the Miami Stadium.
Images, actual photos, players there, Joe DiMaggio, Jackie Robinson, those guys. And then people would ask me, share Orange Bowl. Oh, shit, okay, put Orange Bowl. And then from there, it just grew and grew and grew.
How did the first people find you?
I have no idea. To this day, dude, I always say I'm still amazed even 50 people follow. Yeah. And I'm coming up on like 84K, which for me is insane.
Yeah, let's be really clear there, right? You started Miami Stadium just as your personal handle started doing this stuff.
Yeah.
How many years ago?
2016.
2016,
right?
Dude. But 84,000 followers now.
Yeah.
And you're doing basically the same thing.
Exactly. I'm just sharing history and culture, and it goes everything from sports to movies to art to, like I said, all encompassing.
And it's not, now as your profile has grown and you're kind of a man about town, there's plenty of stuff there's plenty of stuff where like you're a character, you're invited to things, you feature events. Yeah. But how much of it is still, coming back to topic, about the nostalgia?
Everything.
Right.
I'm just, like I say, I just do what I do, and I'm dropping gems and stuff that I like, and if other people feel it, then that's cool. And I think that's kind of where a lot of folks are like, your page is really authentic and organic, because it's just me and my interest, everything is me, and I just put it out there, and hopefully folks feel it.
Tell us about the merch. What has become, because not everything becomes merch. That's got a cost barrier, and like, how is the merch sold, and like, what is the reaction to the merch?
Folks started asking me, when are you going to do a shirt?
When was that?
That was probably within a couple of years of creating the page. And I had some experience going back to, I worked in retail, and I had done some work with like Louisville Slugger and film studios doing commemorative bats. So I had a little bit of experience there. And I said, all right, I'll do a shirt. And next thing you know, a shirt becomes 30 plus designs and a collection. And it goes from people going, I like your shirts to I like your brand.
What was the first shirt?
The Miami Stadium,
Miami
the classic, the photo. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we start with that. Then, okay, let's do another. I said, as long as they keep buying, I'll keep putting out original designs honoring the history and culture. And it became a thing.
What's your best seller?
Orange Bowl. The $10 no block shirt. Yeah. Classic.
Explain it for those that haven't seen it.
Back in the day at the OB, when you wanted to park, right, the Orange Bowl parking was tight. The neighborhood provided the parking, and it was, when I was there, it was $10. And they would do the no block or no blocky, as they would say. And of course, when you come out, your car is blocked, inevitably. But nobody had ever put that on a shirt, man. And I was like, how is that, So again, create what you want, that hasn't been put out there.
And when you find that, when you come up with that idea, that's your photo, or you find that photo?
It wasn't even a photo. It was just like memories of my childhood.
Oh, so that one you designed the art?
I work with an illustrator named Jerry over at Cushy Gigs, who's brilliant. And everything in my head that I hand this man, I just hand it to him and I get out of the way.
Wow.
And I let him cook, and he's a sniper every time he brings it to life.
So all the merch is actually original.
All of it.
Interpretations of things
exactly
that in your memory that you then were like, that would make a cool
memories
shirt.
of my childhood.
So that's the best seller.
Yeah.
What's the most in demand?
I'd say that one as well. Miami Arena. Okay. Very popular. We captured the scene on the steps. The one I'm wearing, the Kimbo.
Well, that's what I was getting at, because I've been trying to get a Kimbo, and
it popped off.
Yeah. I make movies. I'm a producer. Long career as a entertainment lawyer, agent, studio executive, not producer, financier.
Nice.
It's not what we're here for. I'll connect it to things that I have made or am making.
Right.
Most recently, sitting here today, I have a movie. It's still out in theaters, but actually also now out on VOD.
Yes.
As of yesterday, I believe, which is A Working Man.
Yeah.
That is an action movie. It stars Jason Statham. It was written by Sylvester Stallone. It was originally the book that Stallone found, adapted, got to David Ayer, rewrote it to direct, to star Statham, reteaming of Statham and Ayer from Beekeeper, and relevant to this conversation in a way that might not seem very obvious, because of how the movie's been received, not just in its success. It opened #1 at the box office.
Congratulations,
in the first weekend.
by the way.
It's great.
Amazing.
It's the audience rating, which is what you look for in action movies.
Right.
They don't generally get super critically acclaimed. The audience meter is very high. I believe it was 87%.
Well, that's who you make it for.
That's who you make it for.
Yeah.
But a lot of the quotes about it from either from audiences or for reviews, my favorite one, A Working Man brings 80s heroism back to the big screen.
That's a good one.
Right? So that's nostalgia, right? It's like, oh man, there's another saying, they don't make them like that anymore. That's a nostalgia
100%.
quote, right?
Yeah.
So look, is that the entire reason this movie worked? I don't think you can say that. There's a lot of people that saw this movie that weren't alive in the 80s.
True.
And I'll say, when I show even my son, who's 13 years old, went to see this movie with a bunch of other 13-year-olds.
That's so cool.
I've shown him a lot of those 80s and 90s action movies, the ones that, for us, our age and our minds are like, this is it.
Right.
How do you not love this action movie? They don't all play for those kids. Even if you think it held up, the references don't work or the pacing doesn't work, even in an action movie.
Yeah.
So they certainly weren't watching that. They loved the movie, by the way.
Cool.
And they weren't remembering and referencing those other movies. They were actually feeling what those movies provided now in a context that they don't get that fed to them. They haven't seen a contemporary action movie that has. And what does that even mean to have 80s heroism? I mean, look, it kind of means.
Right.
What do you think that means?
80s. I always think back to the films we grew up on. You can go back to obviously Arnold and Stallone and even Bronson. It's kind of like that hard-ass loner guy who, something happens and they have a mission of some sort and they got to get through it, usually alone, and it's gritty. And I think that's kind of what they...
And clear bad guys.
Exactly,
right.
100%.
I think that's part of it too. It's like, you know who the hero is.
Right.
It doesn't mean your hero is a knight in shining armor.
Correct.
Usually wasn't.
Yeah.
All those guys were not that. They were not conventional, clean guys.
No, born out of the 70s anti-hero kind of thing.
Yeah. But the villains were bad.
The villains were
bad. Unlike the 70s, where like in the 70s, kind of everybody's bad.
Exactly. Everyone's bad and worse.
Yeah. So here, look, you hear it almost. Here's part of the 80s part too. It's like, our bad guys in Working Man are Russians, you know, like
Yes.
it's very clearly Russian. So I think that's a little bit of what you have. And it's a movie that's very middle America. It's very blue collar. So what do you ultimately have? Americans versus Russians, which, you know, it doesn't get that much more 80s than that. That's that heroism. And the movie played biggest, just as a side note, in Texas and Florida, right? That's where it played biggest theatrically.
Makes sense.
You know, so there is this, I think that's representative of like, all right, sure it has that nostalgia, but also like, what is America now, right? Texas, you know, not to get political, I don't want to get political.
Right.
But it's worth noting that the Trump slogan, Make America Great Again, that's nostalgia.
100%.
Right? You can disagree over what that even means.
Right.
Over what's wrong, over what great means, over when again was.
Exactly.
The reason it works as a slogan that that invokes emotion is because it's nostalgic for whatever whatever you're remembering.
It hits that nerve for some folks of whatever your interpretation of what that was.
Yeah. So a couple more things about movies, and then I want to bring it back to Miami, because that's where we are. My next two movies also rely on nostalgia in different ways that are worth noting, right? I got a movie, a comedy called Friendship, stars Tim Robinson and Paul Rudd. Comes out by A24 in theaters starting May 9th in select cities. What's nostalgic about that? They don't make a lot of comedies anymore.
No.
They don't make a lot of comedies that get theatrical releases anymore. True. So in the marketing of this movie, and when I tell people, and what is my job, or not job, what do I want to do? I want to get people to see it in the theaters.
Right.
But what I will tap into to get people to see it in the theaters, it'll be funny at home, but you're not going to have the communal experience of laughing.
No, exactly.
And for some kids, they've never had that because they have never seen comedies.
They're streaming everything,
But for adults, we remember that experience. We remember having that experience sometimes every weekend.
Yeah.
And I don't know might as well talk about what are some comedies you remember seeing in theaters? I got a bunch of them.
Oh man,
the funniest comedies.
You could go back to, even as a kid, obviously Caddyshack, which was shot down
in the theaters,
and being snuck into these movies, which was part of the whole kind of thing, right? And then obviously coming up through whether it was the Police Academy films of the 80s and then rolling into the 90s as well. There were so many different ones that I love still growing up to Ace Ventura.
Yeah, I remember Ace Ventura clearly in the
Another
theaters.
Miami movie.
I remember Dumb and Dumber clearly in the theaters.
Yeah.
I remember Austin Powers. I might have almost peed my pants in the theaters. And that wasn't just the movie working and delivering. Those movies do deliver. It's what happens that amplifies it when you have a communal experience.
Correct.
And that's a little lost right now. So can we tap into that with Friendship and say, hey, go tap.
Yeah.
Maybe you've never had that. Go get it. Or maybe you remember it. Like this might deliver that. I'll say on the line, this does deliver it, right?
Good.
So go find it. The other one is even more on the nose.
Yeah.
It's called Nona's.
Nice.
That comes out on Netflix same day, May 9th.
Cool.
That's Vince Vaughn and then a huge supporting cast.
Wow.
All set at an Italian restaurant, based on a true story, at an Italian restaurant in Staten Island.
No shit.
And it's a real story about a guy who was an MTA worker. His mom, Italian American from Brooklyn, his mom dies, leaves him a little bit of money. Yeah. It's like, I'm gonna open a restaurant. Zero restaurant experience. Zero entrepreneurial experience.
Shit.
But he has an idea, and the idea is nostalgic. The idea is, man, what if I opened a restaurant and I got old Italian grandmas, nonas, to do the cooking, right? What's nostalgic about that? They don't have recipe books.
Right.
It's all in here.
It's
in here from like family recipes that are passed down, and you're kind of
man.
constantly trying to find that experience. Sometimes that's about the food. Sometimes it's about the memories of the food in the homeland,
totally,
the motherland,
the smells
right?
and everything. That Sunday gravy, man.
Yeah. Sunday gravy, yeah.
So good.
Yeah, so that's another one. Oh, I guess one more thing about Friendship that is in the movie as opposed to the marketing of the movie. That movie is about, coming back to connection, it is about adult male connection, making friends or having a community as an adult male, and the challenges that our society has placed about that. That's really ultimately what it is at its core. So we talk about nostalgia as being this longing for that connection.
True.
It's in the content as well. I think there's been pretty obvious, iconic Miami movies that bring up nostalgia.
Yeah, big time.
And what do you think that biggest one is?
Oh, it's got to be Scarface.
Yeah.
That's always the correct answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why? Like, why Scarface? You know, when you think about it, you go back to Scarface. Like, I was too young to remember Scarface. I was alive, but I was too young to remember it coming out. I do remember as a Cuban, son of Cuban immigrants, people being angry about it because Pacino is trying to do a Cuban accent and fails so miserably. And I don't remember, but I have read about that. You know, the reception of that movie wasn't through the roof. If anything, it was derided. Certainly, it was derided here.
It was panned. Yeah.
And yet now it's a movie that has transcended movies. It's cultural. You know, and why do we think that?
You know, it's a fascinating thing, Scarface. Anytime I post about it, it elicits a strong response. And it was like from obviously the screenplay by Oliver Stone, Brian De Palma film. The production basically got run out of town. It was only shot here for about a month or so. Certain scenes, you know, the Frank Lopez house in Key Biscayne, the chainsaw shower at 728 Ocean, and then they ran out because of Demetrio Perez and a few other local politicos who were like, this is not representing what we want for the Marielitos. And it got panned, but it became, like you say, that cult classic, especially when it went to video.
I forgot to confirm this, but the Frank Lopez house in Key Biscayne is John Devaney's house right now, who is our host for this podcast. We're here at Manor House. Nice. I believe he lives in that house right now. So that's
crazy.
And so when you say you post on Scarface, you're posting parts that are in Miami because that's your brand.
Yeah, sometimes I'll go and shoot, or I get behind the scenes shots. Like Bill Cook, an old photojournalist, got some good BTS from when they were shooting back in the day. So I share that, and folks love that. And they can, you know, it's quotable, highly quotable film. People always, you know, que más carne ni más carne, all the way to say hello to my little friend. It's just insane.
Yeah. We think about other, not necessarily movies, but another show from that era that is, you know, that bleeds nostalgia. What we got there?
Miami Vice.
Yeah.
Game changer.
Why?
Changed television, changed Miami. I mean, talk about...
Defined the Miami look that didn't exist before that, right?
Yeah, took what was South Beach, 70s into 80s, what was known as God's waiting room. Bunch of old school retirees, a lot of old Jewish retirees, paycheck to paycheck, and turned it, you know, the deco, and just literally gave it a pulse. And you could see the change after that show. It was insane.
Yeah, and imagine that's something you've posted about.
Oh, yeah. That does very well, too. Folks love Miami Vice.
Yeah. What do you usually post? A still from...
Stills. Last year was the 40th anniversary.
Yeah.
1984, 2024. So I went and shot the old bridge where in Brother's Keeper, in the pilot episode where he jumps off at the end, is still there by the high lie. And oh, man, that's like, folks just gobble that up.
Yeah.
Love it.
And I think, I guess on both of these things, both things that are constantly reused, referenced. I mean, there's a great bar in South Beach now called Brothers Keeper.
I heard.
I don't know if you've been.
Haven't
fantastic.
Been. Yeah.
Named after the guys behind QP Tapas. Named after the first episode of Miami Vice.
Yes.
Right. And you know they don't explain it, but if you know, you know.
But if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Scarface, I feel like, especially in hip hop culture, like constantly referenced.
How many references just in songs and in videos?
Yeah.
You know, forever. Yeah.
Anything else comes to mind in TV, Miami or other?
You know, we've had quite a good run of films, from Ace Ventura we talked about, to Absence of Malice with Newman, to Moonlight, which won Best Picture. I mean, we've had a pretty solid run down here.
Yeah. And then obviously last year, Bad Monkey.
Yeah.
Which in a way, you know, when you adapt Carl Hyacin.
Yes.
And you honor it. Right, by not trying to change that tone.
Right.
You're kind of being nostalgic because that's not a tone that's very common right now.
At all.
Right, and it's not for everybody.
Right.
But that kind of like, you know, we're in a more cynical society than when Carl Hyacin or Dave Barry were these Miami voices.
Great writers.
That could just make everybody laugh.
Yeah.
And then they did it through their writing, and they did it through their nonfiction and their fiction.
Yeah.
But when you then go and take that and adapt it in Hollywood, you lose a lot of that texture, or you decide that's not going to work in a different medium.
Right.
And Bad Monkey, I think, it again, didn't work for everybody. If you don't like that tone, you don't like that tone, but it delivered that tone, right? It was the
there.
Wackiness,
but
also like kind of made it. You saw it?
Yeah.
Delivered the wackiness.
Yeah.
Vince Vaughn was like perfect for being kind of the face of something like that.
Yeah.
And the voice of something like that. Yeah. And part of why he was perfect for that, I think, I would argue, is because, so this could actually be true of actors as well. Mm-hmm. he brings that goodwill. What is that goodwill? That's nostalgia for the comedies that he's done.
Yes.
Right? The way he delivers, the way he delivers lines. This is not, Bad Monkey's not a comedy the way Wedding Crashers was a comedy.
Right, 100%.
And yet, when you see Vince Vaughn, being able to be Vince Vaughn and not have to, be a different kind of character and talking with his kind of style and cadence and and jokes.
The way he riffs and his.
We remember. Remember those. We remember Swingers.
Totally. Oh my God.
When we first released Swingers, which in and of itself is a nostalgic movie.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Right? Where you have multiple scenes in play, the Marty and Elaine.
Oh my God.
Old lounge singers in a hipster.
Before
the word hipster was even used.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Young people in LA going to see an 80-year-old couple sing lounge songs. And that was the Dresden, right? And that was cool. Right? Why is that cool? Because nostalgia can be cool. Retro can be cool.
Correct.
And then, of course, the title of the movie is named after nostalgic kind of dancing, swing dancing in a movie that was, I guess, in the late 90s.
That kind of movement came back.
Yeah.
Of that kind of, swing movement. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Things that evoke nostalgia, they do come back. So since we're talking about music, I think there's one artist right now that just delivered. I mean, I think a lot of musicians are fine artists. When you think about sampling, right?
Yeah.
Which is ingrained in hip hop now. It's like your song can become big by using something else that we remember, right? And that works musically. And that's a hit.
It reintroduces it to a new,
But what Bad Bunny just did on this last album is different than that.
Yes.
It's full of songs that are actually original, but maybe with notes that invoke the nostalgia.
Right. Yeah.
This morning I was listening to No Me Olvidaré.
Yeah.
Is that what the name of the song is? There's one of them that's.
I believe so.
There's a song that I had to look it up because that's got to be an old song that he sampled. It's not.
Really?
Yeah, that's the one that's the most salsa song that he has.
Definitely influenced by.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's taking it's a Bad Bunny song.
Yeah.
But it's also a salsa song that evokes nostalgia for the classic.
That's cool.
Puerto Rican or Cuban. I mean, he's Puerto Rican.
He's holding it down for his culture, man.
Yeah. Anything else in music that you would highlight as?
I mean, I think the guy right now, Bad Bunny, is definitely up there, and obviously Kendrick is killing it right now. Yeah. Especially after that Super Bowl performance, just insane.
Yeah, and where's nostalgia relevant there? What's he doing?
Someone who's a lyricist, who's an MC, getting really back to the lyrics of what hip hop is, man.
Yeah. And I think they're evoking, kind of in a political or socio-political emotion that calls back to great Black protest artists or civil rights leader, like kind of bringing this kind of defiance on a platform that was supposed to be all about entertainment and kind of sneaking it in to evoke that feeling. Yeah, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Well, something that's become trendy in Miami, actually, right, which are these vinyl-based listening, there's what's called listening bars. Yeah. But, look, the listening bar is actually a Japanese bar, Tokyo listening bars, where they play all vinyl, they have great sound systems, and people don't really talk. That obviously doesn't work in Miami.
No, that will never work.
Right. What you get instead is you get the great vinyl, you get DJs only playing vinyl, you get incredible sound systems, and you get people talking louder, so you got to play the music louder, so you end up
exactly.
Losing
your voice.
No. But we do have, it's worth knowing, we have 3 of those suddenly in the last couple of years.
Right.
Dante's Hi-Fi, my personal favorite. Yeah. Miami Sound Bar, and then Jolene, which, I think that's not really trying to be listening, but that's a club.
Right.
Yeah. I haven't been, though. That's
they're good. You know what? They're all good. They all have their vibe.
Sound bar I've been to.
Yeah.
But Jolene, even there, is like, all right, you named it Jolene. Like, you're tapping into Dolly Parton.
You're going way back. Yeah.
Right?
That's
like,
a Dolly reference.
Yeah. Like, that's incredible. All right, we got venues we haven't covered. And, that's one that's, very easy for you to talk about. You already have. You talked about the stadiums.
Yeah.
Right? So, Miami Stadium, Orange Bowl. What is that? What is that loss of the Orange Bowl? Why is that? Why is that such a big shirt? Why is it such a big topic? Why is it?
I think.
What does it represent?
I always say that the beauty of the OB was it was a dump, but it was our dump, and everybody went there to root for and support the Dolphins and the Canes.
Yeah.
So it was this communal thing again, where it was just madness and 80,000 people stomping, and you felt that it was going to collapse, and that was life and childhood for a lot of people. So I always say the OB was like the heart and soul of Miami. Miami Stadium had its history. The arena had a short run, but it had a bit. But the OB more than anything is such a loss.
Yeah, and it was a winning era.
Yes, the golden days.
Both for Dolphins and the Canes, but obviously for the Canes, the most golden era. My parents met at Ada Merritt in junior high.
No way.
Knew each other through Miami High, graduated at the same time, and reconnected at the Orange Bowl. Ran into each other at the Orange Bowl at a Dolphin game.
Of course.
So I'm very grateful for the Orange
Bowl.
I don't know if
Bowl.
That's nostalgia. I'm just grateful. It's
totally.
Gratitude.
Gratitude, right?
That's existential gratitude.
Existential gratitude.
That's a different topic.
That's cool.
Other kinds of venues that are commonly nostalgia fueled, which we're dealing with in Miami. I mean, look, everybody deals with it. Old places are always susceptible to change, overcoming them, and modernization, overcoming them, especially in certain areas, and especially if they can't do the kind of business that they used to do.
Right.
That's a part of life.
Totally.
But there's certain places, that usually bars or restaurants, that loss hits harder, right? Like I don't know if anybody mourned when Liquid closed, as much as it was iconic in the development of the South Beach scene, and clubs close all the time. And usually when those close, they're just running, they're getting turned over. Yeah. And it's hard to do. But like when a bar closes, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because Liquid definitely was the shit when it opened. Fat Black Pussycat and Ingrid Cassar is brilliant, but that's kind of what clubs do.
Yeah.
And whereas something like Tobacco Road was a daily thing for people, and another place that brought everybody together, from attorneys to scoundrels to cops to the people they're trying to catch, to athletes to musicians, and everybody's in there either having a beer after work, having the old Road burger, watching the Heat game or whatever on TV. The Road was special, man.
Did you remember what the lifetime was? How long it was around?
It
was
opened,
the oldest bar, right?
It was technically, the building opened as a bakery. Called Holdquist Bakery back in the 1910s, and then it became a bar by the 40s, several incarnations. So yeah, that building was over 100 years old when it closed, just over 100.
Yeah.
Give or take,
Yeah, and then obviously gone now, but lives on in memory because of Kush, right?
Yeah, the
Kush.
tribute on the corner with Patrick, who was one of the owners of Tobacco Road, but there's one that you can't replace.
And what about here? We're here in Coconut Grove. Obviously, that's gone through many transformations.
Big time.
But what are some of those places that held on? We might miss Howl at the Moon Saloon or Hooters or Cafe Tutu Tango. We might they served the function, and sometimes you didn't mourn them, right? You weren't like, damn.
It was more Coco Walk as a whole, Fat Tuesdays, and we hung out and stuff like that.
Yeah, the Johnny Rockets again, which is a whole restaurant designed around nostalgia. That also was
another one.
Place, designed today to give anything that's kind of giving that 50s diner experience.
Totally.
I guess iconic places in the Grove that have closed.
It's the old Coco Walk. The original hits a chord with a lot of people. I remember, it's still there, but when it was known as Hungry Sailor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
penny drafts on reggae night.
Oh my God, that was a scene, man.
Yeah.
And Taurus is still there, which is historic, obviously.
Yes, I guess that's the oldest bar.
So that's the oldest one.
So let's bring it home with sports, man. As that sports, you can talk about nostalgia, in every city. Let's talk about Miami sports and where nostalgia becomes relevant.
Got to start with the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miami was a football town, and I think in many ways it still is. Obviously, we got the NBA later, and MLB and NHL. So we got all the teams, and then even Inter Miami with soccer. But I always say it goes back to the Dolphins and Canes, I think, and the Orange Bowl is what a lot of people kind of grew up with. And it's been so long, I think 2001 since we won with the Hurricanes, 2001. The Dolphins, it's been since 74. And 74 Super Bowl, 72, 73, the consecutive years. So it's been 40 some years. We haven't been, 50, we haven't been in 40 years to a Super Bowl.
And we haven't won a playoff game since when?
It's been
20
years.
Yeah.
So I mean, dude, we're due. And that's
And what I say about it is, I came up with this when we were talking earlier. Yeah. And I like that. I don't even think I nailed it the way I nailed it earlier. Dolphins fandom. The excitement that you can get around a Dolphin season, which it feels like we make jokes that we fall for it all the time. Right. But even having that fandom and believing that, it's because it hangs on the nostalgia of those days when it felt so close. Look, one day again, I hope that what we'll have is modern winning that makes the nostalgia less relevant. even though with all franchises, I think nostalgia is what creates the value, and because then the team spans generations, right? Like, no matter what's happening, winning, losing, you have fans who know the legacy and are remembering the greatness.